From being the most popular Pokemon in 2020 and being one of the main focal points of the highest rated Pokemon series of all time, that being the XYZ series, on top of having the most anticipated return in Journeys, this Pokemon made an entire legacy for itself. But it's important to see how this Pokemon became such a historic impact on the franchise. What kind of story did this Pokemon entail? Well, to do that we have to start from the beginning. This is the story of a Froakie seeking a strength like no other in the world. My name is Pokey, and let me tell you a tale. This is the tale of a Pokemon that was like no other. The tale of... Now this story begins in the Kalos region. Ash was about to receive his very first Pokemon as usual, but this Pokemon was a lot different to how he normally caught his first Pokemon in any other region. That's because Ash didn't choose Froakie. Froakie was the one who chose Ash. The rise of Ash Greninja was actually a very slow and steady pace, and there was references and implications here and there, but for the most part, it seemed like Ash's Froakie was going to become the average Greninja, until it then became apparent that that was not how it was going to be. You see, the day we knew that Ash's Froakie wouldn't become the average Greninja was when he talked about it with Professor Sycamore. Professor Sycamore further explained on Froakie's backstory, and part of it was the fact that Froakie was abandoned from many different trainers before he had Ash. The reason for Froakie's abandonment actually was due to the fact that Froakie was a hot-headed Pokemon and didn't really listen to the trainer's orders, and that was because he wanted to dive headfirst into battle. But what's so weird about that is that Froakie didn't act that way towards Ash, and here's why. The fact of the matter is that Froakie actually saw potential in Ash, and vice versa also happened. Ash saw potential in Froakie in the very first episode of the Kalos series, and that, my friends, was the groundwork and basis of one of the best stories in Pokemon history. Once Froakie evolved into Frogadier, things became a lot more interesting. Ash and Frogadier became much more aware and had a lot more insight on what their future might hold together. One key part that happened in this whole thing was the involvement of Olympia. You see, Olympia can actually see the future, and what she saw in Frogadier and Ash was actually something way bigger than any of us could even predict. And this was later further upon when Ash visited the Ninja Village, and Frogadier eventually evolved into Greninja. But that wasn't just it. Greninja tapped into some unknown power that we have never even seen in Pokemon up until this point. The streaks of red, the resemblance to Ash, the veil of water. This is much bigger and much deeper than Mega Evolution. This is what's known as bond phenomena. Mega Evolution relies on the bond between trainer and Pokemon, which results in a new form change that the Pokemon then adapts to and changes their appearance, and that's what Mega Evolution is. It also gives them a very huge power boost that they can use in battle. You see, the power boost part of Mega Evolution does apply to bond phenomenon, but the whole bond of Mega Evolution is a lot more complex in bond phenomenon. The main reason behind the complexity of bond phenomenon is actually tied within the word bond itself, and I mean that literally. You see, when bond phenomenon occurs, it actually merges the minds between trainer and Pokemon. This results into a fusion, which is why Greninja's outward appearance looks so much similar to Ash's. In the bond phenomenon state, the trainer and Pokemon become so in sync with one another that they can actually feel each other's movements and even pain. This is when we realized that this Pokemon wasn't going to be an Infernape ripoff. This was the story of how a Pokemon sought strength, and that Pokemon saw the person who could help him achieve just that. And that person vowed to help this Pokemon's dreams become a reality. After tapping into this power, Ash and Greninja vowed to one day master this power in hopes of becoming even more powerful in the future. This training then began by using these bracelets made by Clement, one of Ash's Kalos companions, to help monitor the synergy between the two during bond phenomenon. During Ash's fight with Diantha, he was able to activate the water veil that happens during bond phenomenon. In doing so, he was capable of overwhelming Diantha and her Gardevoir. Even after Mega evolving her Gardevoir, Greninja and Ash were still able to destroy her. Their speed was outmatched, their strength wasn't crazy, but it was enough to push her back. There was nothing that was able to stop them. Or so they thought. During the battle, Ash and Greninja simultaneously collapsed to the ground. Ash as well as Greninja were now seeing the roadblock ahead of them. You see, bond phenomenon comes at a price. Although it does grant a significant power boost, so much so that on paper it seemed even more powerful than Mega Evolution. The issue with this is the fact that if the trainer and their Pokemon are not in complete unity and synergy with one another, their state will be completely stripped away, which will cause their state of mind to become imbalanced. Once that happens, the trainer and the Pokemon will black out immediately. So although Greninja wanted to become strong and Ash wanted to help Greninja, they knew they would have to master the ability to become one with one another. That was their new goal, to master the art of bond phenomenon. Now, to master this ability, Ash and his Greninja went through several different battles where they would use the same bracelet in order to regulate their bond. During their battle with Sawyer, they were actually able to use this power without blacking out. During their second attempt against Alon, they were able to fight him without blacking out as well. Granted, they did still lose, but they were able to make progress nonetheless. They were finally reaching a pinnacle of power that most people couldn't even dream of, something special that they made their own. And after reaching the 8th gym, they were able to show off their new power in Potential Wolfric, the 8th gym leader. And nobody would be able to stop them. But of course, that later changed when Greninja and Ash failed to beat Abomasnow even though they were able to release the Veil of Water. Even after gaining so much control over this power, they still lost the last obstacle in their path to show the world their power, and it's safe to say that Ash and Greninja were truly devastated. Greninja had to take time off to recover after being injured by the amount of hail and damage it took during battle, while Ash was so humiliated and frustrated with himself that he headed off into the snowy abyss outside the lodge that he and his friends were residing in. Now, my friends, the Snowbell arc is the final nail in the coffin for these two characters and their development throughout the entirety of the series. These next few episodes were going to show the resolve and growth between both Ash and his Greninja. After the loss at the Snowbell gym, Ash found himself sat down on a log reflecting on himself and what he's done up until this point. That's when Serena came up to Ash and was ready to give Ash the light he needed for so long. After Ash ruthlessly told Serena that she didn't know what he was going through, Serena then turned up and hit Ash with snowballs till he dropped to the ground, telling him that he wasn't being himself, that the Ash she knew wouldn't be wallowing in self-pity, that the Ash she knew would love Pokemon battling no matter how it went down, and Ash was left on the ground with only himself and his thoughts. This was now Ash reflecting on his past self. He loved Pokemon battling. He got the reality check he needed for so long. He was kind of obsessed with this power of Bond Phenomenon, and now Serena was there to give him the reality check he needed to kind of wake himself up and say, whoa, real Ash? The real Ash wouldn't be wallowing in self-pity. He would be coming back up and saying, hey, how can I beat Wolfric the next time? Because the reality was, he didn't lose because he had no control over the Bond Phenomenon power. He didn't lose because he wasn't strong enough. He lost because he lost sight of who he was. He wasn't playing at his best, and now Greninja is wallowing in his own self-pity because he thought that he was at fault for all this, that he was the one to blame for letting Ash down. And that's when both of them reunite in the snowy forest to save Spupa falling off a cliff using their Bond Phenomenon to then save the Pokemon effortlessly. And then after accepting their loss and reflecting with one another, they were finally able to beat Mega Abomasnow and make it to the league. After beating several nobody trainers, he was finally going up against his rival Sawyer in the semifinals. This was the closest he's ever been to finally becoming a champion since the Sinnoh League. Ash knew what he had to do and the battle began. Sawyer used his Mega Evolution to his advantage while Ash activated Bond Phenomenon in response, but this was when Ash was going to fight one of the most brutal moves that's ever been used against him, that being Frenzy Plant. Here's the issue. Frenzy Plant is a move that allows the Pokemon to manipulate the roots underground at will. This was especially challenging for Ash since he had no way of closing in on Sawyer's Sceptile. You see, as mentioned earlier, Sawyer is Ash's rival and has battled Ash on numerous different occasions, although he's only ever beat Ash on one of them, and that was only because Ash was struggling with Bond Phenomenon at that time. Sawyer knew the biggest issue he had to tackle was Greninja's speed, and to counteract that, he used Frenzy Plant to keep Greninja at bay and wear out his stamina. This was more of a battle of attrition, but there was no fear in Ash's eyes. Ash kept cutting the roots with the kunai from Bond Phenomenon, and then used Double Team to make a giant water shuriken to then charge at Sceptile. While Sawyer looked at the shuriken in fear, all he could yell out was Leaf Storm. And Ash came out of the battle as the victor. Ash did it. He was the closest he's ever been to a championship at any point, and his final challenge was right in front of him. The battle that was always meant to be Alon's Mega Charizard versus Ash's greatest accomplishment, dare I say. Now before I go into the battle, let me explain Alon's accomplishments as a Pokemon trainer to really show who Ash is going up against. Alon was used as a tool by Lysandre to absorb Mega Energy from other trainers, getting more and more power every day. He also had heavy experience on battling legendaries like Primal Groudon, Rayquaza, and even 50% Zygarde. So much so that he was able to overwhelm that said 50% Zygarde. He was the reason that Team Flare was able to capture that Zygarde in the first place. Without him, they wouldn't have stand a chance. Alon was everything you could think of. Talented, a prodigy, smart, powerful. He was an absolute unit. And this was Ash's final test. Ash battled hard against Alon. He utilized Guja's Rain Dance to boost his own attacks before he even entered his Bond Phenomenon state. He got some free hits in without taking in any hits in the process, and once the rain was gone, both of them knew it was time. Ash was winning with speed, but suffering when it came to strength, taking major damage from both Flamethrower and Dragon Claw. Although he did use some smart tactics to prevent super effective hits like Thunder Punch by using the Water Stricken on Greninja's back as a shield. But it wasn't enough. Greninja kept getting too hurt by the constant flames and heavy damage from Charizard's brute force. Was Ash gonna lose? Come on, do you really think Ash is gonna go down that easy?
It will reach new heights that no one has ever seen before.
There it is! That mysterious Greninja!
Go, Ash Greninja! Let's go! The Ash I know is full of energy. He's a leader, always tries his best. He's always positive, and he never gives up. He hangs in there till the very end.
Yes, Greninja and Ash did lose. It was a heartbreaking moment. But you guys have to understand, they completed their final test. Now you guys might be confused right now, and I understand that. I did call Alon their final test after all. But beating Alon wasn't the final test I was talking about. Them facing Alon and losing was their final test. It's the fact that Ash, despite being backed up in a corner, despite not having any advantage whatsoever, he was facing a Charizard that has gone up against legendaries for crying out loud. And even still, he kept getting back up, and even after losing, even with Greninja being so disappointed, thinking he let Ash down, he looked back, and his trainer was smiling. That was the moment they both knew. They did it. They achieved what they were striving for all this time. They mastered something that seemed impossible at one point. They mastered an ability that nobody thought was even remotely close to Mega Evolution. They proved everyone wrong. And they became not only rule breakers, but heroes. And ultimately, best of friends.